That's really fun.
So the two students have code experience.
So it's all, so when you find
It's too late.
there,
I'm sorry. Water fountain out there. And it's because she's not your number 8. Weren't I your number 8? Yes. These are the ladies from me.
hi there.
These are the ladies from me.
I'm seeing.
Yep.
I'm the director of the library. So here we are. So here we are.
And you do it like without any humor.
Yes.
Oh, that is only 2 ponds up. So we are.
2 ponds. 2 ponds. 2 ponds. That makes sense to me, right? You know, there's ponds up.
Yeah, we are at,
Sounds very exciting stuff.
How can you not remember?
Maybe like expression and adaptation. Very resistant change. And like the intro to basics. Is all about.
All right, yeah, I know what it is. Is that, can you just on the bed? I'll remember. Oh, maybe I should yell at you.
Yeah, also, just find me there.
So we moved to Kansas. How can that be? My shop. Yes, well, we sometimes cost it. Oh, yeah, Millbridge.
We're going to get going in a few minutes, but this is important. Does anyone have 64 and above in numbers? Who's not playing the number game? I'm just interested. Is it because you're against the man? Is it? I'm rebelling against the man.
I will be here on Saturday, so I imagine you being out with everyone that buys it on Saturday.
I don't think you have to be present for this one.
Yeah.
So now you got to start with 2.
I got it too.
But there's a ton of people who are not playing the game. But I see 2 2s.
2? Anybody needs 2?
You're at 8. Debbie said 8.
I'm 8. All right, hang on a minute. So we're Facebook friends, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm Alex.
We're having
Nice to meet you.
That's right.
That's right.
Guess what?
Oh, great.
Josh tried to cover you
Yes. All right.
Debbie, how are you only at 8?
because I haven't been counting.
Oh, okay.
I was here before it was UMass.
Only at a Computer Geek conference would they give you a game to
I have
meet
been
because
here
they don't trust
between being a
us
student
to do
and
so all by
being
ourselves.
And yet we do.
Many years ago. We won't talk about numbers before the 0.
That's right.
Well, thank you. Nice meeting you.
That's a little bit. You're right. Yeah, we're more extroverts. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kim Edwards, and I'm the Computer Services Coordinator at the University of Richmond. And my wonderful sidekick here and also presenter is Adrienne Voltnek, and she's our Director of Educational Rights Clinic at the University of Richmond. And our program today is on using iPads in the clinics.
So with that, and this is such a nicely wired room that it's really nice not to be tethered to a mic. We have introduced iPads in our clinics. We've done this now for 1 semester. So we are at the very, very early stages of a new experiment, and we wanted to talk with you about how we started that experiment, what we've been doing with it, and where we hope to go with it. And in part, I hope that if not only you have questions, but if you have ideas for us, that you'd be willing to share them, because we really think that this is an important area for us to go into. I wanted to start off by saying, even before we get to this, that the University of Richmond has always considered itself at least an innovator when it comes to technology, although it goes through long stretches where we keep doing the same things over and over. But we were actually the first law school that required laptops for students to bring laptops to school, and we also created the first online journal. So we thought that maybe we could be first in introducing iPad technology in the classroom too, and then we hope that if this works well, it's something that will spread to other places. One of the reasons that we started doing this was because as clinicians, when we were out in the community, in court, at meetings, etc., the lawyers that we were seeing, private lawyers that we were interacting with, lawyers for school boards, prosecutors, etc., were utilizing iPads pretty heavily. And so our thought was that as clinicians, if what we're trying to do is introduce skills to our students, we need to think very broadly about those skills, that it's not enough for us just to talk about teaching students how to do good direct examinations and cross-examinations. It's not enough to talk about interviewing and counseling, but we also need to talk about the technology that is being utilized by lawyers. We need to make them practice ready. And it seemed even more apparent that this was something that we should be looking at in light of changes that the ABA recently made to the model rules of professional conduct. Rule 1.1 of the model rules deals with professional competence. And while the rule itself does not address technology, in the comments to the rules, it specifically states that lawyers need to understand the technologies that they use and the concerns and strengths, and I'm paraphrasing here, that technology brings. And so we thought that that really added an extra dimension to our need to really introduce, to really think deliberately about our use of technology within the clinics and how to use it. So that's how we began. I thought that this was a really interesting little item that appeared in the ABA's journal in May, which essentially said, CLEO study that said that between 2010 and 2013, we've seen a jump from 26% to 67% over that period of lawyers using iPads for work. So again, that really supported our own observational experiences and our reasons for moving into this direction. So we began there, and we were thinking about how to do this, and the university runs a Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology, and every semester they send out an announcement that anyone who's interested in bringing technology into the classroom in new and innovative ways can file for a proposal, and if they like the proposal, they'll provide iPads to the classes. So we, with the help of our library staff and with staff from the CTLT, put together a proposal. We talked it over. We talked about some of the ideas that we had and put together a proposal. The proposal was funded. And so in the spring semester of this year, every student involved in our Education Rights Clinic, our Children's Defense Clinic, our Family Law Clinic, and our Actual Innocence Clinic was issued an iPad at the beginning of the semester. So that's where we started and how we started this initiative. One of the drawbacks to what we were doing was me. As the oldest clinical professor on our faculty, I'm the least technologically adept. And so part of what I needed to do, along with the others, was to figure out a way that we could really engage our students in learning about this technology, in part so they could teach me what they learned so that I could then use it. So this was very much a collaborative effort with our students. We knew certain things that we wanted to do, but we really wanted them to get involved in the process. And so as we sat and talked among the faculty about the proposal, we sat and thought about different things that we thought we could really use technology for. And we came up with 5 areas where we thought it would be really important to find applications that we could use, but we didn't really know which ones were good, which ones were bad, which ones would work, and which ones wouldn't work. So we decided that we would all take very close looks at the materials that we were asking students to buy in order to prepare for our classes, and to see if we couldn't find ways to cut those out, to find applications that could replace some of those materials, and then to identify, as I said, skills and say to our students, we need you to experiment with applications in certain areas. We're cutting down on books and materials you have to buy. We want you to buy apps instead. These apps will stay with you. If you like these iPads, you're probably going to find yourself wanting to buy one. But even if you don't, so many of our students come with iPhones that most of these apps work on them as well, and that they could use them. So we looked at the areas that we knew we had an interest in. First off, we knew we wanted some kind of a reader app. Something that would read documents. For example, I knew that in my area of law, if I go to our state's education website, there are certain regulations that in the past I used to download to my desktop, so I'd have them for quick and handy use. But they also download into a reader on an iPad so that you have those materials there and can use them at any point. So we said, please explore reader apps. The other piece that we said we wanted was a scanner. There are lots of scanners out there, and we said we want you to explore scanners because we thought it would be really valuable as we were out in the community when documents come up that we knew we would want to keep, to have scanner capability on our applications. I go to meetings with my students, parents bringing documents. It's really nice to be able to scan them right there so that we can upload them into the files for the community. There are documents similarly in court files. If you can scan them right there, it's really much easier. So we thought these would be very useful and would be tools to increase efficiency of our students in the long term. And to save on costs. You know, if you go down and you have to copy things and pay for copying costs, that's an added expense. So we thought that that would be worth looking at. Another really important one for us was a document signing app. There are many times, for example, when we need our clients to sign, for example, releases for information. And we'll do releases when we meet with them, they'll sign releases, and then we'll be out in the community and someone will mention a different set of records located someplace else that we haven't gotten a release for. Now we can open up our iPads, we have the releases there, we can tailor them, and change the wording of them, and we can have them sign releases on their iPads, and it's very convenient. We're not in the position of sometimes, which we have done in the past, having handwrite releases. It's a much more effective and efficient way for us to use it. We wanted them to identify word processing applications. There are a number of drafting applications, but we really didn't know which ones were good, and we really wanted them to experiment with those. And finally, we needed a recording application because we knew that we are often in places where we do actually need to record what's going on. For example, in the work that my students do, they often accompany parents to programs called IEP meetings where plans are developed for the education of the students with disabilities. Those can be recorded by parents. And so we thought having an application that would allow us to record, have digital recordings that we could then upload into what we were increasingly putting into computerized files on our NAS system was something that we thought was really important. So we set them up with the task of exploring documents in this area to find, exploring applications in this area to find out which applications worked well and that they felt were efficient. Along with that, we decided that we would also, and we may talk about this a little bit later, so I might be a bit out of order, was that we would set up a non-academic blackboard for the students to discuss the applications that they were using. So we set that up, and we required every student to report on the different apps that we wanted them to explore. And
show that now.
yeah, that's right. I forgot we can do this with this technology. We set up a blackboard for students, and there is also, by the way, a very wonderful app for Blackboard that our students didn't know existed, and so they can now keep up with our coursework as well. But we set this up, they commented on the apps that they used, and then we asked students and others to also comment on those. Some of you had tried the same apps. This is obviously one of my comments on this, but it was a way for us to discuss this. And again, because we were utilizing this initiative, we introduced this initiative in 4 different clinics. We wanted to make sure that students in all of the clinics could be interacting with one another, and a non-academic Blackboard gave us the opportunity to do this. So again, we had students from those 4 different clinics exploring those applications. That, as you saw, was a student looking at Notability, which was one we ultimately decided was a perfect app for our purposes, at least in the Education Rights Clinic. And it's one that we now will, this coming semester, which will be our 2nd semester, will actually direct the students to download. We'll ask them to experiment with some other things, but we've identified some we know they'll work with. We also, we also had applications that we asked them to download immediately when they got their iPads, so that they could utilize them, because we knew they would be important for them. One was Clio. Clio has an application that was actually developed for the iPhone, but it works very well on the iPad. And we recently adopted Clio as our software management system. We've been in it 1 semester longer than we've been in the iPad initiative, so we're new to it, but we're finding it to be very, very helpful for us to manage the paper, to manage our files, because as I'm sure is the case in all of the clinical programs in the schools that you're at, the number of paper files that were developed over time just overtake us. And so we have been moving all of our client files into our NAS and some into the Clio, increasingly into the Clio cloud network. So we're looking at that. That was required, and then our students were trained on Clio. Again, they're all better at it than I am. But it's very, very useful for them in managing their cases. Something that's critically important in a clinic setting, because we have turnover of students, and if students are not managing the data and managing what's going on well and thoroughly in their files, we lose information that students have when they move out of that semester and into the next semester's program. So this has been really, really helpful for managing those files in a much more comprehensive and cohesive manner. So we've been very, very pleased with that. We also said you've obviously got to have research applications on there. And our students, some of them really like Lexis to use, some of them really like Westlaw, but we also encourage them to download the application for FastCase. And we did this for a very specific reason. And the only reason that it's not only because the law school has a subscription to FastCase, which is very helpful, but also because in Virginia, the Virginia Bar provides FastCase to all of the members of the profession. So for the many of our students who stay in the state, and we do have a fairly high percentage of students who do remain there, despite the fact that they come from other places. Richmond is a really appealing community in lots of ways, high quality of life, and we can't push them back. So lots of them stay there. This is a free legal research service to them if they're members of the Virginia Bar. So we wanted them to learn how to use it while they were in law school, so they would feel comfortable with it, again, once they got out of law school. So again, we've been trying to think this through thoughtfully about what will be useful and what will really build their skills. And then our last one that we required was a way to access our NAS system. Because before we introduced Clio, we had begun migrating most of our client files onto the NAS. And we found too, and I shouldn't say we, I had nothing to do with finding it. Kim had everything to do with finding it. We all know that librarians in law schools are like clerks to judges. Nothing works well if the librarians don't find it out, because people like me are constantly calling and saying, how do I do this? Can I do this? Can you do it for me? And Kim found two wonderful apps that we use regularly. The first is AnyConnect, which essentially works as a VPN. So that we can get into our NAS system. It hooks that up, and then File Browser, which opens up our nets in our net files, which again is our local NAS, is what we call our local NAS. So we required students to do that so they could manipulate the data that we already had. So that's where we were. And as I said, in the fall, we're going to add the Blackboard app to the required apps, as well as Notability. And we may find that as we sit down and discuss this again with all of the clinicians before the fall semester, that there may be some others that we will add as required too. So we will move into that direction.
So as Adrienne mentioned, there was a few required apps. So AnyConnect, I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but we have a Cisco VPN system at the University of Richmond. This is a free app that you can download from Apple Store. There's also a very similar, I don't remember if it's called AnyConnect, but it's very similar that if you're on the Android platform, they have an app as well. And it's very easy to download, it's very easy to connect to. I've already set up my U of R connection. To use it, all I have to do is click on the on button and then authenticate with my username and password. And this connection is very slow. I don't know if you guys have, if you read in your packet, but you can't get to certain email sites, with our guest account here at Harvard. But if you do connect through a VPN site, then you can. So just FYI, it kind of makes me laugh that we can get to Facebook all day long, but we can't get to our work email. So whatever all that means. So anyway, this is being very slow, and they told me it probably would. But anyway, so you click it, you log on to it. What we've instructed our students to do is, even if they are out in the field and they can get to their Clio app without being connected through our VPN client, to please do so, because it's a secure line, and Starbucks isn't nearly as secure as the University of Richmond.
We actually, at the beginning of each school term, we have an orientation for all of our in-house clinic students. And one of the major things that we talk about in that orientation is security of computer data, security of systems. And we talk about all those very things, that when you sit in Starbucks utilizing their accounts, you risk your security, to say nothing of potentially confidentiality if you're working on client records in that environment. So we try and raise those security questions and security issues consistently throughout the semester, and we start it during our orientation, because we know that that's a crucial piece. We know, for example, that some of our students use unsecured accounts, that in apartment buildings and things like that where there are people who do not password protect their internet access. And students have on occasion acknowledged that they are more than willing to take free internet wherever they can find it. And so we do find it really important to counsel them about the risks that are inherent in doing that. So we work very hard.
She said that very nicely, how we can counsel our students about that. So once we're theoretically connected through our VPN client that didn't work, then you can use the app file browser to get to our NAS. We call it net files. This I had opened up earlier. These are some files that I have sitting in our my personal net files folder. And this is the only app I found that really worked well with our system. And I think it's $5.99, so it's fairly inexpensive, and we didn't feel bad about asking our students to download a $6 app instead of buying books.
Again, since we've taken out expensive casebooks,
Yeah.
And other textbooks, we literally removed them from their financial load when we're doing that. And part of the reason we did that is that we could, for example, say we want you to use your reader. Can you find some of the same information that you can download into a reader and put that in it? Not necessarily from books, but for statutes that are available that we would normally have them go to. As I mentioned, one of my favorite documents is the state regulations governing education that we use all the time, available on the State Department of Education's website and readily downloadable onto the reader that I use on my iPad, so that I have them there. So we were saying, do these things instead, and we were identifying in each of our different clinics subject-specific resources that they could use and utilize on their iPad rather than the materials that we would typically orient them from. The other thing that we did, of course, was we put many resources on our blackboards. I did not learn about this Blackboard app until Kim brought it to my attention after the semester was over, which is why it wasn't one of our required apps then, but will be the next time, because that will again give the students access to resources, because again, we are going to try and keep them from buying other materials.
So we use Clio, and oh good, so it orients better on the screen than it does for me. This is really a app that was developed for iPhones, and so unfortunately with iPad, it wants to always be in portrait instead of landscape. But thankfully it doesn't display that way, so that's really nice. So because we can't get on the internet right now, I can't show you what it looks like, but it does a wonderful job of managing files. Some clinicians use Clio more than others. It really depends on the clinic in which the students are in. And because it's such a new program to us, we're every day learning something new about how the software works, and hoping to have some more training here soon. So
I'm laughing only because downstairs in the hospitality suite where the Clio representatives are located, I was sitting down there writing emails, and I turned around and saw a Clio booth with the young woman with a t-shirt on that says, "Ask me anything." And in working with Clio, and as I said, this is just our second semester, we started it the semester before, there were just a number of things that my administrative assistant had told me that we couldn't do with Clio that were a little bit frustrating, but we were figuring out workarounds, and I thought, I'm going to ask. So I went up to them, and in fact, they said, yes, you can do them. This isn't something that we standardly train on, but you can do those things. And she said she's going to send my administrative assistant the materials so that we can actually make it work better for our clinics. So they're actually really nice to work with, and of course, because the software is free to law school clinical programs, it's one we opted for.
the price was right.
Since we decided, well, we didn't decide, but our dean, I think, is much more supportive of buying iPads for use and issuance to students than in spending thousands of dollars on the software management system.
Yeah.
We think that's a good choice.
Yeah, we're happy with it.
Clio has worked well for us, and we can tell from talking to the reps it's going to work even better.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So then another app that we required our students to look at was a document signing app. So one of the best examples we found was called Sign Now. So what you can do is you can just import a document into this app. Very similar, when you're asked on iPad, how do you want to open this? You use the Sign app, and it's so easy. It's so super easy to use. So you click on where you want to type, insert text, and you can insert the text, and click the little plus button. And then down here where you need to sign, you can insert a signature. And for students, you can go ahead and save your signature so you don't have to keep always signing it. But if you want to, click and do a new signature. And you can choose different colors, which is lovely if you want to. And you've got 2 different kinds of pen types you can use. And then you can even just easily move it around so it's actually in the right location. And then when you're done, everyone's done signing, yes. And then if the internet connection wasn't as slow as it is, one of the options we would have is, would you like to import this somewhere? And you can easily import it then into Clio. You can also import it back into the NAS system. So everything gets saved back into a nice, safe place.
And And as I mentioned before, this is actually one of the most helpful apps that we have because of the number of times that things come up that we don't expect to have happen when our students are out in the field working directly with clients, sometimes working with providers, et cetera. It's very useful for them to be able to take this step, and it creates real efficiencies for them, especially because they can edit those forms that we put on. And the Blackboard, up until now, we've been keeping all of our forms on the Blackboard. They can actually access them
Very easily.
directly.
And then Notability was another app that we have fallen in love with, if you haven't seen it. I want to say it's a free app, but it might be a $2 app. It's a little bit of charge. Now, the Sign Doc app, it's free, but you have to subscribe to a monthly subscription, and it can get kind of pricey. So the first month is free, and then it's like $25 a month. So $50 for a semester. How much are books? Law books are expensive, you know. Kind of have to.
Yeah, we're actually exploring whether or not we can create some clinic accounts with, yes.
Do you use the volume app pricing?
We haven't yet.
When you buy them as an institution, what you do, and you can recycle them.
That's what we
So
need to do.
sign up and do your administrative volume app pricing, and then you can do it two ways. You can give it to the person for forever and always, or you can pull it back and then redistribute. So you own them as an institution and sign them out.
And that's what we'll be looking. Yeah, I know.
I was just trying to get to their site to figure out whether or not any of the ones you were mentioning were in
Yeah.
there, but I can't get at it.
Yeah, it's
To tell you that.
yeah, it's not letting us do that right now.
That is, as I said, I really hope that you could give us comments and feedback. Ultimately, given probably another semester, perhaps all of the next year, we hope to write an article about this and about how we use different apps. So I love this suggestion for us.
We'll make a note.
Yeah.
A notability.
Right, or on notes, because I also find that I use notes now on my iPad all the time for reminders, and that's been very, very useful for me, the notes function. Not a special app, but it's incredibly useful for keeping track of information and making you track.
So Notability works this way. It looks like a simple note-taking app, but it has this little recorder button. If you push on the little recorder button, you can see it's lit up and it's listening to me. So if you are in a meeting and you're taking notes, you could still take notes. But it's also recording everything in the background. And so for our clinician students, this has been very, very helpful for when they're out in the field and meeting with their clients.
The other nice thing about this is that as you take notes, later on when you need to listen to the recording, if you hit the separate note that you took, it takes you into the transcript of the audio at the same time. So as you can imagine, for example, the IEP meetings that I mentioned may often last 2 hours. And it's really nice that when something that's really important comes up to be able to take notes on that so that we can go back and, especially if there are any contentious areas, we can go back and really verify and check what was said at those meetings. So it's become an important function for us on that particular piece.
And then another app that I really like, it's called Dragon Dictation, which is, remember the old Dragon, what was it, Naturally Speaking back in the day that did a really, really bad job? This one does a much better job. I even find it with my Southernisms, as I call them, with ways in which I pronounce words sometimes. And mostly, and I might need internet, so I might not be able to demonstrate it. It mostly does things correctly. It does make fun of some of my words, but yes, ma'am.
Also, if you have iOS 7, well, functionality is figured out.
It's built in?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
It's
cool.
a little microphone that you touch on the keyboard and it just, you talk and
It's so awesome. It's awesome stuff. So, and let's see. So the next thing I want to show you is, let's see. So what happens if you're not allowed to go into a courtroom, or you've got your iPad and you want to display something, but you can't put an Apple TV on your network? Well, there's not an app for that, but there is a workaround. I'm going to show you how that works. So just give me 1 second, and I'm going to show you how.
this is an area we're just moving into as well. So that this last semester with our experiment, we did not use any of the growing number of courtroom-related applications. But we expect to be introducing them in the next semester, so that we are moving in that direction as we move along. One of the reasons, in truth, we haven't tried it yet is that in my clinic, the Education Rights Clinic, it's rare that we get into court. We occasionally have due process hearings, and we could use them for that, but we didn't have any last semester. In our Children's Defense Clinic, where they are in court more often, there are often plea arrangements that are made, and we're still dealing with juvenile courts in our area that are not very technology friendly, so we're easing them into that. We actually had to get, that clinic had to actually get permission from all of the local juvenile and domestic relations courts to bring in iPads. Lawyers have been bringing them in for some time, but we had to get special permission for students. When they went in the first time, they said, no, then we'll supply to them as well. So it took us a little bit of time to get permission, but that's all set up now so that all the students can bring them in.
So I wish I could take credit for thinking about this all by myself, but I can't. This past spring, we had a technology boot camp at the University of Richmond, where we had lawyers working in the field that use technology to come in and talk to our third-year law students. And one of the prosecutors that was there brings in this little kit to the courtroom with him. This is an Air Express, the white one, and I've set up just a hotspot that doesn't connect to the internet whatsoever, but it does tether with the Apple TV, and so then I can AirPlay. And so I can walk around the room with my slides. I can go back and show you different apps that we were just using without being tethered to the podium. And at the University of Richmond, we're just now exploring putting iPads in the classrooms, not iPads, but Apple TVs in the classrooms. We've had the way in which they talk, our network wasn't capable of understanding how they communicate, but we're now figuring out how to do this. So the downside, of course, is I can't get on the internet if I needed to, but for presentation purposes, and if I were doing an exhibit or using my iPad to do exhibits, I can do so and walk around the courtroom. And the prosecutor is, he's not in Henrico County,
Hanover County.
Hanover, which is nearby, has gotten permission from the courts to bring his little doodads in with them. I just call it my tech kit. I've made up important fun names there. And so as we move forward, what does the future hold for us besides downloading other neat apps? We also
Before we talk about that,
Mhm.
I just wanted to point out one more thing about what Kim is doing now and walking around with this. And that is that we've used Keynote for these slides. And what we found as we were preparing this, that when you use the AirPlay, you actually get a different capability for your displaying your slides than when you use Keynote alone. And we found that really interesting. I don't know, Kim, is it possible to show that visually?
Yeah.
So for example, when I'm using Keynote, I haven't been able to find a way to get my presenter notes next to the slides, the way you might
With PowerPoint.
in PowerPoint.
Mhm.
But when you're using AirPlay, it does. It works with that. So it provides a different capability when you're actually tethered or untethered than when you're with the tethered system. It's actually much nicer when you're untethered and walking around.
These devices expensive?
Good question.
No, they're very inexpensive. So the Air Express is $99 and the Apple TV is $99. So for $200 and the cost of an HDMI cable, they happen to have the HDMI cables here, so I didn't have to use mine. But in my little kit, I keep an HDMI cable in there in case I need it. So what's that, $15? So $215 basically. You can roll and hook into anything that has an HDMI cable. Now there also are adapters that you can buy for HDMI cables if your displays don't have them. And they range from 15 to 25 bucks, I think. I don't think they're terribly expensive. So back to the fun apps. So when the prosecutor was there at the technology boot camp, he was showing us some other neat apps, including this Magic Plan SCI. See,
I gotta interrupt.
See if I-
The other nice thing about using this and having a different display is that you no longer have to be as linear in your presentation, because you have your slides all lined up along the side and you can switch. So if you're talking about something and the discussion develops normally in a way that you had not necessarily thought through your presentation, you can just hit a different slide very easily and you're not fumbling around. So it's a much more effective presentation method than Keynote. Sorry.
Yeah, Keynote's awesome if you haven't used it. Hey,
If I can interrupt you one more time, I haven't had a chance to test it, maybe some of you have. I think the latest update in Apple TV lets you connect via Bluetooth,
it does.
but that might reduce some of your range. You probably get a better range with the
It does.
Express.
iOS 8, yeah, iOS 8. Well, I think it's actually the device that allows you to do the Bluetooth. And also, and I didn't mention this before, but you don't have to have just Apple products to make this work. For Windows machines, there's a product called AirParrot, I think is the name of it, and it's $10. It's a piece of software, and it works beautifully. I play with it in my office. For the Android devices, there's some ways in which you can connect to the Apple TV, like to play your content that's on your Android. And there's a beta version of a piece of software that would allow it to mirror just like the iPads do. And to do it, I have to root my Android device, and I'm not comfortable rooting my Android device, so I haven't played with it as much as I have liked yet. So I think in the very near future, we're going to see like something like this play nicely across all platforms. So you're not tethered just to Apple products. Yes, ma'am.
There's a Crestron product that just came out last September called Crestron Air Media.
Yep.
It does the exact same thing, but it's $1,200.
Oh,
But as far as a classroom solution, that way our instructors could use their iPads in classrooms across the university's enterprise wireless without the extra equipment
yeah.
expense.
It's something. I forgot what. And I was just in a meeting recently, and that talked about what it was with how the Apple devices were chatting on the network that they had a problem with. But they're made for home use. But what a wonderful thing for institution use or anywhere use. Even in your office use. If you wanted to have a meeting in your office and you didn't want everyone just gathered around your laptop computer. We're going to put these down in the clinic, and then that way they've got a conference room, and if they need to talk through anything, they can. And we're going to start requiring the students when they do presentations to use. They may not have to use Keynote if they don't want to. I don't know why they wouldn't. But anyway, whatever they want to do for presentation purposes. So, before I run out of time, that's okay. So there's these two great apps. One's called Home 3D, and the other one's Magic Plan CIS, which allows you to kind of build a crime scene, and then you can show it on your iPad in front of the jury. And then there's another one called Exhibit A, which I've been playing with. It's a really cool little app. So basically, you can build all your exhibits and put them in these little briefcases. And so if you're a really busy lawyer, you go in, you've got all your stuff for all your different cases right on your iPad. And you can store not just still media, but if you've got a movie, you can put a movie in there. Oh, interesting. That's not what I see. Let's see. So, or maybe it's because I don't have anything in it. I'm sure that's why. I don't have anything in my little briefcases. But that's what the briefcases look like. It's really cool. And then another thing that we've been playing with is, and I'm sure everybody knows about Office 365. And so if you buy subscription for that, you can also use one of your licenses for your iPads. For academic use, it's $79.99 for 4 years, which seems expensive, but we figure that's $20 a year for the app. And what Adrienne particularly loves about this app, one of her frustrations with the word processing apps is she uses track changes a lot with the students' documents. And there's no app including Pages, and Pages is it's a great iPad app too, but it still didn't give her the capability to track changes, where the Word for iPad really does. And so if I were to decide to track changes here, I just hit the review button and turn track changes on. And I'm able to type and able to use that feature.
That's one of the features that, on my normal Word software, I do use a lot with students. That inserting comments, especially since, although as deadlines approach, I sometimes edit a little more heavily, but initially I want to be able to insert comments. And so we're really excited about this app. When our students wrote reviews of the Word systems, Pages was probably the favorite of the apps that they, the word processing apps that they used. But for me, it was still very frustrating to use when I'm used to the functionality of Microsoft Word. So we're really excited about the fact that this is now coming out, and Kim is actually exploring licensing for us on a group rate so that we can have those across the board.
So, and I have to explain my haiku, right? They're like, what? So, we were challenging ourselves one day in the library with haikus, and our first year students had just finished their first semester. Professor Berryhill is a emeritus professor at this point, and he had this reputation of scaring at least 5 students a semester into dropping out of law school. Now, I don't know if the statistics are really true or not, but he had this reputation of really being heavy-handed with them. So that was the haiku that I came up with. So Berryhill wasn't there to scare them away.
Right. We find that what we found in this first semester, and this is a work in progress, that some students loved the iPad and took to it immediately and were really very, very experimental. Some were remarkably like me, which I found a little frightening, in that they seemed to be very unwilling to begin to move into different technologies. And they would say, I can do all these things on my laptop. Why should I have an iPad? And we kept, what we tried to say is, yes, you have a laptop, and it's very, very efficient, and it's really replaced the desktop for most people. But is it what you want to be carrying around all the time with you all the time? Or do you want to be using something that is lighter weight, that has really very good functionality, that you can easily take into a courtroom with you, and utilize for every function better and without a screen standing between you and whoever else you're talking with. While people, I think, really bought the impact of taking down that screen and using the flat surface tool, it was still a real challenge. But again, we're in the middle of this experiment, so we are eager to figure out ways to effectively make everyone engage very well. I would say that we probably had about 90% engagement, but we did have some students who, no matter what we did, we couldn't get them to use their iPads. Well, as I said, we're working on that. We want to make it 100% of
With your Office 365, Microsoft Office 365, I understand it's a cloud-based app, kind of like Google Docs. Does that mean I have to have an internet connection to edit documents?
Nope, which is lovely. So if I wanted to save this document, I could, let's see, I can, well, I've already got it down, I've already saved it to the iPad. So, and this is kind of cool with this. So once you open the document, you immediately have to save the document, unlike Word for real. And so there's no choice. I mean, you can't really lose the document because it immediately makes you name the document. And at that stage, you have a choice whether you're going to save it to your cloud account or if you want to save it to your iPad account. So I haven't played with the cloud account, frankly, because I've just been interested to see how the apps behave right on the iPad.
Well, one of the
But
things we do
let's see.
is students could put them in their netpods, in the netpods that we have, because our clinics have segregated, isolated, secure netpods are local nets, and they could easily put the document there and continue to pull it up and work on
Okay, so this is asking me if I want to save it to Kim Edwards' OneDrive account, or if I want to save it to my iPad. And so I just want to save it to my iPad. And so I can. Are there any other questions?
I wanted to add one other thing. I mentioned that we got the iPads because we wrote a proposal to the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. And that offer was only for a semester. This is experiment, figure out what you need, and then after that, it's up to you. Well, we actually felt that the results of the first semester were really positive. And our dean was very, very supportive of it. And she has made a commitment along with the rest of the university to make sure there is an iPad available for every Purdue student moving forward. So she is putting her money where our mouths are and really supporting this. And she's very convinced that this is a technological use that our students really need to have as they're moving into the workforce. So we're just so pleased that she sees its potential and is working with us so that we can continue this initiative.
Yes, ma'am.
Were there any uses that your students put iPad to that surprised you? You can expect them to go in that direction.
Some of them, and it didn't occur to us, but some ended up downloading. We required them to report the number of hours that they spend on all their clinic work, what they're doing on cases. We do that for a number of reasons, just accountability. They're according to our requirements, they're supposed to spend 24 hours a week working on clinical materials. And so we do ask that. We've always had timesheets that they filled out and submitted. And some downloaded timekeeping applications, which is one we just haven't thought about. Now, none of them reported any of them as being ones that they really, really want. And we're actually trying to see if we can figure out how to more effectively use Clio to keep the time management for everything related to cases. Because we do have certain cases that we work on where we need to make sure that hours are locked up because we can submit for attorney's fees under certain cases. And that's always nice to come that does. So that was one area that we just haven't thought about. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that people reported on that they really liked. Chris probably would have been the most effective at coming up with new things. We had one student who just dove into this. He was the leader. He was always coming up with optimal.
I'm gonna try out in that space. It's called Artist App. I think it's free for a single user. It's a subscription basis for your tracking.
We'll look at that one. I don't think that's the one that you pulled up, but there are many. There was a hand back here.
Can you went with iPads for use in the clinic. Did you compare them versus like Microsoft Surface and choose the iPad for any specific reason?
I can, the reason the university subscribes to iPads. They bought a ton of them, and so.
So it was more of a convenience.
Right.
I'm just wondering why you went that way as opposed to Microsoft, which would hook into
What we're finding too, so as the years have progressed, more and more of our students are Mac students. And last year, 60% of our first year students brought Macs. Today, well, when I left to come here just this week, the report's 2-to-1 Macs versus PCs. So I thoroughly expect to see at least 70% of my students bring in Macs this year. And with that, they bring the Mac products with them.
Yeah.
But
frankly, I would really love the opportunity to have an experiment with Android kind of tablet to see how it worked. I think right now we're at the limitation of because of the subscription that the university has, we will go with iPads, but in my mind, it would have been really interesting to split up the opportunities to find out about capabilities, because I've heard there really are some very good apps being developed for other devices.
To back you up a little bit more, in the real world, from the stats of the ABA part, what you mentioned a little bit at the beginning, it really is, when it comes to tablets, overwhelmingly iOS devices, with a little bit of Android, a little bit of Surface thrown in. For really good information about all this, the ABA tech show site puts a lot. There's 60 apps in 60 minutes and 60 apps for Android. So all that, there's a lot of good things to play with out there. They recommend it. They've done a recommendation and they can get us to us.
The ABA has this on their website?
ABA has a lot of information.
Yes, sir.
I have two questions. One is that just we talking about, but you answered. The second one is the air map.
Mm-hmm.
How secure is it encrypted? How did, especially when you mention cleaning, has to be secure. Everything has to be encrypted.
So if the Apple TV is connected to our network at school, then I feel it's very secure. Because right, so the Air Express isn't on the internet. It's just providing an opportunity for me to connect to the Apple TV.
It's one of the reasons some of our courtrooms have a lot of, because they are internal as opposed to connected to the internet. So the court house has not yet seen any concern with doing that. And that's really, obviously we're using it here for a presentation and we're security wouldn't matter because we're not talking about anything confidential. In the courtroom setting, there may well be, especially if we're talking about our juvenile courts, which are close to the public. But again, it just creates an internal.
What about documents on the iPad itself, though? What kind of consideration do you give to lost iPads?
We've got software that's loaded on all the students' iPads that we can send a signal and wipe them immediately. So if a student were to say, and we unfortunately had a student lost an iPad this past semester. So as soon as he realized it was lost, we were able to push that and wipe it. But we never found the iPad. We make them turn on, like where you can log into iCloud to find, where's my device type of thing. And I don't remember why we weren't able to find it with that. I can't remember now the details, but we were able to remotely wipe it.
And one of the other things that we discuss with our students actually is not to leave things in the cloud, that they put things into Clio, which is supposed to be secure. They can put them into our net files, but that we don't want things sitting on the iPad in their Dropbox. So we really talk to them about Dropbox as a pass-through. If for example, we take an IP meeting, we take the recording from Notability, we put it into Dropbox, and then we pull it out of Dropbox and put it into the other and get rid of it. So our goal is to not have anything to sit there. Like that.
What about maybe, sorry.
Sorry, I just have one question about it. Have you run into any issues where someone already had an iPad, so they have two iPads? Can they use two accounts? How does that work?
We have run into issues. We have run into that again one semester. So we had a couple of students who had iPads. The iPads that we were issued were newer, and they had the option. They could either use their own iPad or they could. They had the same right as every other student to have one of the law school issued ones. Everyone chose the law school issued ones, and often what we heard was, okay, now my spouse can have mine, or we'll use this for my children. But they all knew that they were giving it back. So these are theirs for the semester only. But yes, we have had that, and we tried to treat those students as having the same right to have that iPad as anybody else.
Do you restrict personal use on it?
No, we don't. One, we think it's too hard. So we know that people are downloading games. I have games downloaded on mine. We don't try and restrict personal use for them any more than we restrict them using their university email accounts for personal emails. So no. And again, we wipe all of them at the end of the semester. So they all get wiped. If there's anything personal that they have, for the apps, it doesn't matter. They still have them there in the cloud. They just download them again onto their other devices or their phones if they have phones. And I would say again, the bulk of our students probably have iPhones. A few don't, but most do.
I was just going to ask, because you have documents stored both on Clio and on your NAS, is there any issue with keeping what's the right version of that document, or do you just keep the storage separate based on what footage they're in? Or?
Well, one of it is we have net files. We were using net files long before we started using it. So we have lots of files that are there, and then we have some newer files that are all over the For some of the older ones, we haven't migrated because of the size of the files and the investment in administrative time that it would take to just transfer them. Not that much, but nonetheless we haven't done it. But what we use one